I'm going to be talking about the history of the Friends of Dorothy. Now, some of you may remember some of the recognition symbols we had in the olden days. Wearing an earring in one ear, particularly that one if memory serves. Some lesbians would have a little star tattoo on the inside of their wrist. Or they would wear a thumb ring, which I think is still actually quite popular. And a whole host of other little things, but one of the main ones, pretty much since the Second World War, was, are you a friend of Dorothy's? I'm a friend of Dorothy's. And what I'm going to be talking about tonight is where that actually came from. There's two basic theories, and I don't think either's invalid. I think one has a bit more weight than the other. So I'm going to explain both theories and where they come from. And then I'm going to tell you a little story about how the Friends of Dorothy subverted a US police organization and really wound them up, to the tune of about $6 million worth of investigation in the 1970s, which is back when $6 million was a lot of money.
Still quite a lot, yes.
So anyway, so the first theory basically posits that it stems from The Wizard of Oz. So as you know, Judy Garland, massive gay icon, particularly later on in her career, where she was really channeling the camp. I mean, any fan of RuPaul's Drag Race would have loved some of Judy Garland's later shows, and her shows were often very much like attending a gay bar, particularly if you were near the front of the crowd. So, The Wizard of Oz was one of her early films, and it was basically the story of Dorothy Gale, which is where the Dorothy reference comes in, and how she traveled to a magical land and basically found herself and connected with a chosen family. So the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, and the Lion Man. And it's a fantastic tale, and it came back into popular consciousness around about the time that the Friends of Dorothy became a popular password used amongst, or token, if you will. Some people use the term shibboleth, but that's a bit archaic and, well, Hebrew, but I'm not bothered about that. But so it came about round about the time of the Second World War, and Judy Garland's life really fed into gay culture, and there's no evidence to suggest that she was actually LGBT herself, but she was definitely a very strong ally. And because of all the troubles that she had and all the persecution she personally suffered, it really struck a chord with the gay community. And so basically the theory is that there was supposedly, I haven't actually double checked this one, I have to admit, but there's supposedly a passage in one of the later books in the Wizard of Oz series where Dorothy goes up to the guards of the Emerald City and goes, "Hi, I'm Dorothy, and these are my queer friends." And that is one of the potential links between this. But I mean, you've got to admit, I'm sure most of you have seen the film. Knowing the film, you can see how it really fed into popular consciousness and how it's been attributed to the Friends of Dorothy over the years. And then we come on to the second theory, which is, we have to go back a little bit earlier, to the 1920s in New York under Prohibition, and there was a socialite, broadcaster, writer and wit called Dorothy Parker, who was basically champion of the unchampionable. If they were in a press group, she would go out of her way to actually champion them. Amongst the people that she championed, she really liked to champion the LGBT community, to the extent that she actually threw specific speakeasies for the gay community. And the password to get, because you always needed a password to get into a speakeasy during Prohibition, the password to get into these speakeasies was, "I'm a friend of Dorothy's." And again, her circle of friends was collectively known as the Algonquin Round Table, and were a group of free thinkers, socialists, you name it. It was everything there, and they really, really normally I have a slide deck when I do.
You're doing well here.
So I'm freewheeling a little bit. But, so anyway, so Dorothy Parker, because of this actual link that we know about, that she used "I'm a friend of Dorothy" as the password, and as the upsurge in the use of "I'm a friend of Dorothy" came to the UK around about the Second World War. This tracks with other things that we've spotted with gay linguistics. So there's an uptick in Polari in the use of GI slang from pretty much the same period, because of all the American GIs that came over. So the basics of this theory is it came over to the UK and has been used in the US since the 1920s as a password to identify yourself as a gay person, and just drop it into the conversation where straight people just wouldn't know what the hell you're on about. Which, to be honest, I can think of several things you could say. Don't make me make a list. So, some of you have seen some of my other talks, and they get a bit filthy. Right, so, where was I? So, basically, I've already alluded to this part before. So, how many of you have seen the TV show NCIS? How many of you are boycotting it because of how it often depicts LGBT people, furries, and other marginalised groups in a negative light? Yeah, thank you.
That's why I'm not watching it.
Right. Okay, well, NCIS as an organisation was basically the successor to a naval police force in the US called the NIS, the Naval Intelligence Service. They also did spying and things like that. So it was a slightly broader remit that they operated under. But the basic, what most of them did was they persecuted LGBT people in the Navy. So much like in our own armed forces before the year 2000, for the Americans it was the year 2010 when it eventually, was it 2010 or 2011 when it eventually became legal to be gay in the military. And obviously that's all getting walked back at the moment as we speak. But an NIS officer at a naval training base on Fort Michigan, just outside of Chicago, was basically doing what they do, which is basically investigating, trying to find anybody who might be gay on the pretext of if he didn't find somebody, he'd have to make it up on someone because, let's face it, the way these investigations usually went, innuendo was enough, unfortunately. And so he's investigating, and he's around this bar. And he's listening in on conversations, and he's trying to get young sailors to take him to the toilets, this sort of thing. And people keep dropping this name around him. And he's intrigued, because he quickly comes to the impression that, right, there's somebody organising the gay people in Chicago. And this somebody is Dorothy. Now, Dorothy might be a code name, and he took it to his superiors. And they gave him the remit to actually start a full-scale investigation. And basically got a load of other investigators going around all the gay bars in Chicago trying to find out who Dorothy was. And in the end, they spent $6 million on this investigation. It took them that long before somebody finally cracked, and I'm sure in the interrogation room, it's the first time the person on that side of the room has been giggling. Basically cracked and told, "It's a password, you dipshit." And so, essentially, it's just such a wonderful story. And coming back to the topic, so in conclusion, I think Dorothy Parker is more likely the origin, but I don't want to detract from Judy Garland, because I think she was a fantastic inspiration to the gay community as well, and the LGBTQ community in general. And basically, I think that's about it. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Can I say something? It's not a question, but I was lucky enough, I was left a little bit of money and I went on this fabulous Cunard cruise all the way to Australia for 7 weeks. And the laughter that came out of this meeting, that was called Dorothy's Friends, once a week, it took me a while to realise what we were talking about. But I got to know everybody afterwards. Obviously came out and we laughed and whatever. But it's a big thing, obviously on some of these, like the American cruise ships and things. It's there on their agenda. We're having Friends of Dorothy meetings. So
brilliant.
It's great.
Yes.
Yes.
We, just out of general history, we were very close calling York LGBT Forum Friends of Dorothy. But then we thought it might not necessarily have everyone would understand that kind of history or that kind of information.
There is actually a charity in Leeds called Friends of Dorothy who are fairly similar to the forum. They try to create safe spaces for the LGBT community. I don't think they advocate quite so much and don't do some of the other bits that we do. They don't have people looking into international things and that sort of thing. But
no connection with .com then?
pardon?
No connection.
No.
And actually, Dorothy's become quite a popular name again.
Yeah.
To use for their
Well,
young
to be fair, the first time that "Are you a friend of Dorothy" got used on me in anger, I was horribly in the closet. And I'm looking at the guy because mutual friend of both of ours is Dorothy. And I knew he was gay because I knew his boyfriend. So it's like, yeah, what are you asking me? What? I didn't understand. I completely wet fish on that one. And it wasn't until later when I came out and I started doing talks on Polari and did my glitter talk. And yeah, I started actually finding out, because obviously I'm looking for how gay people used to recognise each other. And I know one of the ways would have been, dropping a bit of Polari into a conversation. Oh, father that.
Love Polari.
I've got to finish the book.
Maybe they'll update the name a little bit. Are you wicked?
I was raised like around the RAF side of the British military, and there was like an old anecdote from World War II, where the RAF is the opposite of the Navy. It's known for having quite a lot of lesbians in it. Especially back in the day, because it was one of the WAF was so numerous. There's so many ladies in the Air Force and doing all the computing and stuff. And one of the base commanders discovered this and ordered his head secretary to write a list of lesbians and he'd file them all. And she stood up and said, "Of course, sir, just so you know, my name will be right on the very top." as will your stenographer and all of your computers, which was the name for the people who did the maths back then. And is that true? And the whole office went, "Yes, sir." Never mind. "Yes, sir, good idea, sir." And that was just the way that it went. They very quickly said, let's not waste the money, shall we?
I do have a similar story that a friend of mine who's kind of an ally. He was a squaddy basically, and he was a squaddy at the time that it became legal to actually be gay and in the armed forces. And he remembers one of his mates putting a bogus notice on the notice board, basically saying, as per legislation, it's now becoming illegal for anybody who's gay or bisexual to be a member of the armed services. All the people that are affected by this should assemble on the parade ground at such and such a time on such and such a date for a briefing. And then all these people showed up, and then the paratroop regiment marched past going, "Cool!"
I wonder how many people showed up to both things in solidarity.
Absolutely. It was a lot in the military of that, from what my father told me, was that it was never officially written in any rules that you couldn't be gay in any of the militaries. It was just, it's not a good idea. But the Americans basically turned off the don't ask, don't tell, and we all went, well, you all knew anyway, I'll say it properly. And it even down to that, I believe, this might be something I was told, I think it was the SAS didn't allow women until about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And but they still had about 3, because they were men when they took the tests, and then obviously transitioned.
Yeah.
And so I believe at one point that there were trans women in one of the special forces, because they realised, well, we never wrote a goddamn rule about this. just leave it alone. And just the differences in kind of overt versus quiet oppression.
I've met the first, I can't remember her name to be honest, the first woman to transition in the RAF. Yeah. She gave a talk at something else that I was doing a performance with Sue.
Yeah. Oh, Sue.
Oh no, that was a nightmare. You know I'm scared of heights.
Yes.
It's like they've got this stage. It's about an 8-foot drop.
Jeez.
This line of seats that have been bolted down, and we're supposed to perform in front of them. There's a gap about that wide, and I've got a paper bag on my head. I was wetting myself.
That sounds very soon, doesn't it? That's amazing. I think what's interesting is, especially like the Friends of Dorothy stuff, is to keep that information alive.
Oh yeah.
And to keep that, and I think you're right, Ginger. In a way, I think Wicked will become another next thing of that, because there's such queer undertones in Wicked, and the way in which it's presented, and
dancing.
And the song "Defying Gravity" and how liberating that song is, and how a lot of LGBTQ plus people relate to that is quite interesting, and I think people do link it to Alice in Wonderland,
Yes.
not Alice in Wonderland.
Wizard of Oz.
Wizard of Oz. I'm getting the wrong thing. I mean, Alice in Wonderland is a good thing. But I mean, you follow the rabbit nevertheless. But I do think it's quite a good. It's interesting how us as LGBT people cling to these different characters because we see ourselves in them, in particular.
That's especially interesting with Wicked, the first one having come out pre-October, was it? Which around that time, and it's about the start of people ignoring groups being hidden and persecuted, and the second one's going to come out after everything's
I know, it's going to be really interesting.
How you fight back against that aggression.
Yeah, and those that don't know, Cynthia Ivero, who plays the Wicked Witch of the West, Alphabet, is identifies with being a lesbian, and but that is quite important, and I think you're right, Robin. I think it's going to be quite interesting.
See how many people that goes straight over their heads. Absolutely no message.
Yeah.
So I didn't see something, I don't know if it was just after the film had come out, that in 5 years they might not even be able to show Wicked. It could be like if certain people in America get their way, these films might be put on the list and not.
They're always trying.
Well, it's something I said at Holocaust Memorial Day. Was it starts with banning a book.
Yeah.
So what I now say, it starts with banning information, and that's what they're doing. They're erasing us in America. So the CDC and others, all HIV and AIDS things has just gone out of the world, but also other things.
See, what's interesting as well, and I've thought about this quite a bit, is because now we're downloading things as opposed to buying the CD, or in theory these downloads could be removed from our computers. If we own the CD or the DVD, you would feel like you're more linked to it.
Yeah.
Say these could be just taken off.
If anyone from a medical like a scientific standpoint, if you ever want to find the original published piece of scientific work, just email the author, they'll give you it for free.
Yeah.
Don't pay.
So if I email Ariana Grande,
Hi Ariane, it's me Ginger.
how many copies of the DVD?
He didn't reply to my last email.
This is why, I was going to be Ariana.
Things can be thinking in that direction there as well with public disorder offences being used against peaceful protesters.
Yes, very much so. Well, there was a scary time when we thought that Pride might get banned in York because of the public.
It's technically a protest.
It's still technically it's a protest. Technically we're loud. Technically we parade in the street. So the police could, in theory, stop it and arrest us all. Under the public offence.
You know how much trouble we went through to get that started.
Yeah.
I know we did. We remember Fiona.
We had to jump through so many hoops. You can't have moving vehicles on a parade. Well, it's ridiculous. Everywhere else does.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's still the case now.
Yeah.
How
So
many,
I
how many
think.
floats and those things do you
Yeah, I think the council really, of any persuasion in York at the moment, would not ban it. It's the most successful and the largest of anything that happens like that. But there were, as Jake and I know, the early days, there were so many hoops to jump through, ridiculous ones.
But it is now very.
But it's very much there, and you've got
Yes.
support, and we're here, so you can't see everyone's behind it completely.
I think the public as well, when you walk through through your parade.
Oh,
All the way,
okay.
not just Fishing Road and all of that, you
Oh,
hit
they love it,
that.
yeah.
All along, people who are not LGBT.
Of all
look
ages.
at all ages,
But,
yes.
but
Yeah.
worryingly,
Culture.
I mean, I'm an age where I thought things would only ever progress. This feels really strange, and now we're going backwards.
Yeah.
This feels very. I'm assuming this won't be allowed in 10 years. What a lost story.
The last remnant.
That's where we, I think that's where it's keeping the present of these are minorities. They are vocal, they are wealthy, but they are minorities. And I think that's the bit we've got to perspective of them.
See, it's a loss of free expression.
Yeah.
You know, it's such a shame.
Yeah.
So
It's such a shame. It's a loss of free expression.
yeah, when you've had something to have it to. For those, I've got a good friend in Syria who I speak with every day, and he was saying to me, why do gay people in the UK, why don't you just hide and just keep quiet then? And he was saying it in a positive because that's how he is. I said, well, it works. I said, because when you've had on it, you can't and go from there and go back.
What
I
would
guess
you do
it's
with that
survival
time?
mode, whereas
Yeah.
we're in.
Yes, yeah,
Not so much survival.
yeah.
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
I got the very best bit that said, any questions? I'm sorry I missed the talk.
There were questions.